بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن اهتدى بهديه واستنى بسنته إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته, and welcome to this 28th class of fiqh with the grace of Allah Azza wa Jal. Today we will start the fifth pillar of Islam, which is al-Hajj. And the Arabic word for Hajj means to go for a definite aim. In Arabic we call it al-Qasd. But linguistically is different than legislatively. So in Sharia, what does Hajj mean, or what is it defined by? Scholars say that it's an act of worship through fulfillment of certain rites in a particular place or places during a specified period of time in accordance with Allah's Messenger's practice sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Hajj is done at a particular time, and these are the months of Hajj, and it has to be performed at particular places such as Mecca, Mina, Arafah, and Muzdalifah. It cannot at all be performed elsewhere, and it definitely cannot be performed in other than the months of al-Hajj. And it has to be in a sequence and in accordance to the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What is the importance of Hajj? This is indeed a pillar of Islam. It purifies people from sins and keeps away poverty when they frequently perform it. And it is a fulfillment of the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who said, keep on repeating Umrah and Hajj, for they purify an individual from poverty and sins, like the bellows purify the iron from the impurities in it. It's sufficient also to know that whenever you perform Hajj perfectly and you do not associate it with any impurities such as fighting, swearing, or sexual intercourse when a person is in the state of ihram, then we know that he will come as if it is the day his mother gave birth to him. So Hajj is a huge ritual in Islam. Unlike prayer, it's not only physical. Unlike zakat, it's not only financial. Rather, it's a combination of almost all forms of worship, where you refrain, like fasting, from doing certain things, where you're compelled to act and do certain things, when you have to provide and spend financially in order to be able to go. So all of these give Hajj its identity and its important role in a Muslim's life. What are the conditions? Okay, someone says, I want to perform Hajj. Well, there have to be conditions that are fulfilled. And the first condition, as usual, is Islam. due to the fact that it is a form of worship. So a person has to be a Muslim so that Allah Azza wa Jal would accept his Hajj. Without Islam, no prayer, no zakat, no fasting, no Hajj is accepted. The second pillar is sanity. So in order for a person's Hajj to be valid, he has to be sane, which means that if we go for Hajj and we take someone who is insane with us, we accompany him with us. So he goes with us to Mina, to Arafat, insane. And then after a few years, he recovers, gains his sanity, and becomes normal again. Would that Hajj be sufficient? The answer is no. Because the condition was not fulfilled. He was insane. And the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ is clear. The pen of accountability is lifted as regards to three types of people, and one of them is the insane until he regains his sanity. The third condition is reaching the age of puberty. The same hadith we've just mentioned, the Prophet said, ﷺ, the child until he has attained puberty. So a person is not accountable until he reaches the age of puberty. Which means that if a child were to perform Hajj when he was 10 years of age, and he remembers everything he did in Hajj, and it was according or up to the book, then he reached adulthood. We tell him you have to go and perform Hajj again because you're ordered to perform Hajj once in a lifetime. And the conditions were not fulfilled when you performed it with your parents. Of course, one would say, okay, if it's not accounted for, why would he do it? Well, a woman carried an infant to the Prophet ﷺ and said, O Prophet of Allah, does this one have Hajj obliged upon him? Or is it valid for him to perform Hajj? And the Prophet said, yes, and you will have reward for it. But the consensus of all scholars that this hadith is regarding the reward and the validity, not that it would be sufficient for his one lifetime Hajj, which each and every Muslim is obliged to do. Therefore, he has to perform Hajj again once he reaches adulthood. Number 4, freedom. The fourth condition is that a slave cannot perform Hajj like a child cannot perform Hajj, in the sense that he can perform Hajj and the child can perform Hajj, but would it suffice for the Hajj of Islam? The answer is no, because the condition was not fulfilled. So even if the master approved his slave to go for Hajj, some scholars, an issue of dispute, said that once he's freed, he has to go for Hajj. He has to perform his Hajj. Others say that no, this is permissible. He can consider that to be his Hajj, because scholars who said a slave does not perform Hajj meant that it's not obligatory upon a slave because he's owned and possessed by his master, and by allowing, or let us say by obliging him to go for Hajj, that his slave to go these days and he has to spend over him and pay him, etc. And the fifth condition is the ability. Allah says in the Quran, pilgrimage to this house is a duty owed to Allah by all people who are able to undertake it. وَلِلَّهِ عَلَى النَّاسِ حِجُّ الْبَيْتِ مَنِ اسْتَطَاعَ إِلَيْهِ سَبِيلًا. So it is a duty, it's a must to perform Hajj if you have the ability. But what is meant by ability? There are two types of ability, generally speaking, to all Muslims. One is the physical ability. A woman during the Hajj period came to the Prophet ﷺ with her father on a camel, unable to sit clearly, he's almost going to fall. And she said that my father cannot sit on a ride, so transportation is a problem. So can I perform Hajj on his behalf? And the Prophet ﷺ said yes, meaning that it's not obliged upon such an old person to perform Hajj when he's unable to do that. So physical ability is a must. Someone who is handicapped, who has special needs, who can barely walk, can only be carried around, or would fall sick or faint if he travels or if he goes to such places, they are all exempted from performing Hajj. In addition to physical ability, there is also the financial ability. Someone who's healthy, who's strong, who has the physical ability, but he doesn't have dinaros, he doesn't have money. So Allah Azza wa Jal does not oblige him to go, simply because he doesn't have the cash. Should he beg? Definitely not. Should he ask for zakat? Definitely not. Simply, he should not go until he can financially afford it. And by the way, affording it is not simply paying the ticket, paying the camp, paying the fees of Hajj. It also includes that he leaves enough provision for his family and for himself when he comes back to find available, rather than being stone broke and begging people. So you have to have what it is needed to go back. And a female also has a condition of ability of her own. So in addition of physical and financial ability, a female has an extra condition, which is the companionship of a mahram. What is a mahram? A mahram is a male companion prohibited for a woman to marry for life. So her brother-in-law, she's prohibited to marry as long as he's married to her sister. But if her sister dies, or if she divorces him, then he can marry her. He's not a mahram. A father, a son, a brother, a paternal or maternal uncle, a nephew, these are all mahram by kinship. We have also the father-in-law and the son-in-law and the stepfather and the stepson also being part of the mahram, and so on. So she has to have the companionship of one mahram who is an adult, who is a Muslim, to accompany her. We move on to the essentials. Hajj has pillars. You miss one pillar, your Hajj is invalid. So these are quite important to learn and to know. And there are 4 of these pillars. The first one, to be in the state of ihram. So it's both mental and physical. So you have to assume the state of ihram. Now, you see me wearing my headgear, my thobe, white thobe. These are normal clothes, things that are restricted in the state of ihram. And this is why we have two states. The state I'm in is called halal. Not that it is prohibited. Halal means that I have not restricted anything upon myself which Islam tells me to restrict. So I can clip my nails, I can cut my hair, I can wear a shirt, I can wear trousers, I can wear shoes, I can wear headgear or turban or whatever, etc. These are the restricted things in ihram. As a person who's halal, I can have intimacy with my spouse, I can get engaged, have a marriage contract, etc. These are all halal. The moment I assume the state of ihram, I become a muhrim, which means that all what I've mentioned becomes prohibited for me while I'm in the state of ihram. I cannot wear shirts, I cannot wear trousers, no shoes, no headgear, turbans. I cannot clip my hair, I cannot clip my nails, I cannot wear perfumes, I cannot get engaged or get married or even propose. All of these are prohibited and restricted in the state of ihram. And this is why it's a pillar. If a person goes to Hajj without assuming the state of ihram and does every ritual in the Hajj, his Hajj is invalid. I didn't know. Tough luck. This is a pillar. Even ignorance does not allow you to consider that a valid Hajj. So pillar number 2, which is attendance of Arafat on the 9th day of the Hijjah. The Prophet said in an authentic hadith, Al-Hajju Arafah, which means that you have to attend the location, which is Arafah, on the specific day, which is the 9th of the Hijjah, are crucial for a person's Hajj. And we will come to discuss later on, inshallah, that attending the day of Hajj is not restricted only to sunset of the 9th. It can go up till the break of dawn of the 10th at extreme cases. And we will talk about this inshallah in detail. So don't worry and hold your horses. Number 3 is known as Tawaful Ifada. And there are different types of tawaf. Each has a specific role and a name. So we have Tawaful Qudum, which is in Al-Hajj usually, and this is Sunnah. We have Tawaf Al-Umrah, which we do when we perform Umrah. And this is both Sunnah and a pillar. A Sunnah because it is considered to be a Tawaf al-Qudum. It's the first thing you do. But it is a pillar of your Umrah. We have Tawaf al-Ifada, which is a pillar in Hajj. And this Tawaf has 3 names. Tawaf al-Ziyarah, Tawaf al-Ifada, Tawaf al-Hajj. 3 names for the same ritual. Then we have Tawaf al-Wida', the farewell Tawaf, which is mandatory. except for a woman in her menses or in postnatal bleeding. Then we have Tawaf, which is a sunnah, but it's voluntary. And that is a set of 7 rounds you perform whenever you come to the masjid. You're sitting, you're not having anything to do, so you go and perform 7 rounds of tawaf, not in the state of ihram, but rather just like that. This is also recommended and you're rewarded for it. It's not mandatory. So the third pillar of Hajj is tawafu, except after the day of Arafat. It cannot be performed before the day of Arafat. Number 4, the fourth pillar, which is our last pillar, is walking between the 2 hills of As-Safa and Al-Marwa. In Arabic, we call this as Sa'i. As-Sa'i. And this for Hajj is a pillar as well. However, only for a person who's performing Hajjul Qiran or Hajjul Ifrad, this can be performed before Arafat. But for those who are performing Tamattu', it must be performed after Arafat, like Tawaf al-Ziyarah. So this is an option that we have when we perform Qiran or Ifrad Hajj. And what is Tamattu', Ifrad, Qiran? I'm getting confused. No, don't get confused. We will come to talk about this in detail later on, inshallah. Because each Hajji, each pilgrim, has 3 rituals to choose from. So like you have in cars, moderate, sports, and racing modes. In Hajj you have Tamattu', you have Qiran, and you have Ifrad. And the Prophet ﷺ told us how to perform each one of those, and the scholars talked about it extensively. So we will get to speak about this, inshallah, and I'll try my level best to remove all types of confusion that may occur with the grace of Allah Azza wa Jal. So these are the 4 essentials, the 4 pillars. The state of Ihram, standing in Arafat, Tawaf, and Sa'i of Hajj. Now we have a number of mandatory acts, duties, and we also have like a number of questions, so I'm not sure whether should I take the duties and mention them and see what happens afterwards, inshallah. So Rayyan says, if someone wakes up for Fajr late, he prays the Fard first. Can he continue with the Sunnah afterwards despite it being forbidden times? How about his intention for the Sunnah? Should it be Qada? First of all, we know that for Fajr prayer you have to pray 2 rak'ahs before it. And misses these 2 rak'ahs, he can pray them afterwards. Whether he prays them afterwards before the sun rises or he waits until the sun rises. The evidence is the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ when he once prayed Fajr with the congregation. After he concluded the prayer, he saw one of his companions standing to a pillar praying 2 rak'ahs. So he stood up and walked to his companion while the companion was praying and kept on repeating, is Fajr 4? Is Fajr 4? Yani, we prayed 2 rak'ahs. Why are you adding 2 rak'ahs to it? Is Fajr prayer 4 rak'ahs? What is this? So the man concluded his prayer quickly and then explained to the Prophet ﷺ, O Prophet of Allah, I was in my home when the iqamah, when the Fajr prayer was called for. So I rushed to join the congregation, skipping my voluntary prayers. So now I am making them up. So the Prophet ﷺ did not elaborate and walked away. Scholars say that the Sunnah is identified by whatever the Prophet had said verbally, or whatever the Prophet had done in action, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or whatever done means that it is permissible to pray the Sunnah of Fajr after you pray the Fard of Fajr, even though that this is a time of restriction, because as we have explained earlier in the chapter that dealt with Salat, that the times of restrictions, it is prohibited to pray voluntary prayer that has no legitimate reason. But prayers that have a legitimate reason can be prayed even if it is times of prohibition, such as you can pray Tahiyyatul Masjid whenever you enter a masjid and it's 5 minutes to sunset. You can pray 2 rak'ahs before you sit down. You can pray funeral prayer after Asr or Fajr. You can pray the prayer of eclipse. You can make up any missed prayer, because all of these prayers have a legitimate reason to offer, and hence they are exempted from the prohibition period. Basil al-Fawzan says, is there any guidance on coronavirus, and remind the people to return to Allah and ask forgiveness for them? Of course. Allah Azza wa Jal, as mentioned in Surah Al-Isra chapter 17, and we do not send these great signs except to intimidate people. When the sun eclipses, when the moon eclipses, these are signs, great signs of Allah Azza wa Jal. So why does Allah send these signs? To intimidate people and remind them who Allah is subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have been delusional. We think that we're strong. We think that we can challenge Allah Azza wa Jal. Atheists think and believe that it is okay to claim that there is no God in this universe. Everything was created by chance. And they have the audacity to think that we are the strongest in this universe. Look what Allah has done to them and to everyone else. Allah has sent a creature that cannot be seen or detected by sight. It is so small, you need huge electronic microscopes to see it. People like crazy. It killed over 3,000 people in China. Daily basis, the average in Italy is 500 dying. Of course, it targets the elderly, because the average age of those who had died, who are now increasing over, I think, 5,000 or more in Italy, the average age is 80, meaning that there are 90 and 100, but the average age is 80. So this virus had forced people to lock down everything. isolate themselves in homes, fearing the virus which Allah has sent to remind them who the creator of the virus is, who's the creator of the heavens and the earth, who is the creator of the jinn and the humans, so that they worship him. Allah did not create us to have fun, to play around, to eat, drink, and mate. Allah created us to worship him. And he had set a time for each and every one of us on this earth, average of 60 to 70 years. And then it is eternity in hell or eternity in paradise, up to you. So this is our testing ground. And Allah Azza wa Jal is testing us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reminding us, bringing us back to him. Those who continue to wear face masks, use sanitizers, isolate themselves, yet still being neglectful of Allah, they have not passed the test. Those who have gone back to Allah, asked for his forgiveness, expressed their sincere and deep remorse, did or engaged in a lot of good deeds, such deeds to the best of their ability, only so that Allah would pardon them and uplift what is happening to them. Those, inshallah, would have passed the test with the grace of Allah Azza wa Jal. Ebra Javid says, I wanted to know if permanent family planning is allowed, provided I'm unable to continue with any pregnancies because I'm 38 years old and I have slip disc problem and I already have 3 kids. I know my physical strength can't bear more kids. My husband is also okay with this decision. Please let me know. Well, Ebra, if this is a medical situation that the doctors advise you not to conceive in the future, and you have 3 children and your husband is okay with it, and you're seriously afraid for your health due to your slip disc and to different other illnesses, the answer is yes. There's no problem, inshallah, in permanently having it blocked so that you don't conceive anymore. Nafla says, an old lady who's so weak, can she pray without wudu? And she can combine salah, or can she just say adhan, the time of prayer, without praying, because sometimes they don't even know what they're saying? Okay, the question is not clear, but I think I have an idea of what she meant to say. If an old woman is sane and knows what's going on, but physically it is difficult for her to perform wudu, well, in this case, we have to look at how difficult it is. If she's just lazy or tired, but she can perform wudu, and there's no harm on her, it is a must that she performs wudu to pray. She cannot simply pray without wudu. Then she must try to go for the alternative, which is dry ablution, using tayammum, hitting the sand or the soil or the dust with both hands, wiping your hands and wiping your face. If she's unable to even use that, in this case, Allah Azza wa Jal does not burden a soul beyond what it can bear. She can pray without wudu or tayammum. But this is between her and Allah. Giving the adhan is not permissible for a woman So I don't know what you meant, Nafla, by that. And if she doesn't know what they are saying, or she is senile, she doesn't know if it's morning or evening, she doesn't recognize her children, she is unable to determine things or to make choices or decisions, in this case, she's not obliged to pray. So many elderly who have lost it, when you tell them pray, they say, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. And then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know right from left. We don't tell such people to pray because Allah Azza wa Jal does not hold them accountable when they are not sane, when they do not have their consciousness. Her second question is, I keep my mom's gold for years, and I used to give zakat from my own money because she never had receiving a salary from inheritance of her son who passed away. So I decided to take her own money and pay zakat for her gold. The answer is, if she is senile, she is unable to decide what is good and what is bad, and she doesn't have the sanity to decide when to give zakat, the answer is yes. If you are in charge of her wealth, you can take from her inheritance that she got from her son grams of pure 24 karat gold. Asma Moon says, my early age in Ramadan, I did not fast all 30 days. So many lunar years I did the same. But now I realize I did wrong, and I, with the grace of Allah, fast the whole month. Before which fast I miss, is there any way to do this? The answer is yes, of course. Any days that you have missed due to your menses, you have to make them up. If you don't remember the number of days, you have to estimate and add some of your own just to be safe. So a woman says, I reached the age of puberty when I was 11. Now I am 20 years of age. And the past 9 years of my puberty, I used to have my menses, but I never made them up, and I don't know how many these days are. So we say, okay, 9 years. What's the average of your menses a month? She says, between 5 and 7 days. So I say, okay, so 5 times 9 years, this is 45 days. And 7 multiplied by 9 years, this is 63. So you range between 45 and 63 days. Choose an approximate amount so that you would be safe. And doing 63 days would definitely be safe for you. So start fasting 63 days. If you're certain that it is 60 or 55 or 50, then go ahead and do that. But you have to estimate and add maybe a day or two just to be safe rather than sorry. This is regarding the days that you have missed due to your menses. But if you skipped days in Ramadan intentionally, you did not even fast 1 minute of these days. From the night, you said, I'm not fasting tomorrow. Without any legitimate reason, you cannot make those up. Mahaj Hassan says, can I feed the poor in exchange for a missed day of Ramadan? Can only be done when a person is chronically ill, never to be recovered, never to recover from what he's suffering from, as the doctors say, or if a person is too old to fast. Definitely he's not going to get younger any longer, so every year he is getting weaker and weaker, he cannot fast. those are the people who can feed or give fidya. Sahra Ali says, if the gold is not 24K, is it still zakatable? And if I have money and gold, but the gold does not reach the nisab, do I have to pay for it? First question, if the gold is not 24K, this means that it has some impurities in it. So 22 carat of gold means that there are 2 out of the 24 which is copper or other types of minerals. 18 carat of gold means that there are 6 impurities in it. This is also zakatable because the 18 carat is zakatable. But how to calculate the nisab? It's easy. If you have 90 grams of 18 karat gold, you multiply the 90 grams by 18 and divide the result by 24, and you will get what's 24 karat of gold in it. So I'm not good with calculations. This is the calculator. If we have 90 grams of 18 multiplied by 18 carat and divided by 24, this means it's 67 grams and a half. So it did not reach the threshold, which is 85. And the more you go up and do the same procedure, multiply by the carat of the specific gold you have and divide by 24 to know whether it had reached the nisab or not. If it reaches the nisab, then you ask the jeweler shop to estimate the value of this gold and give 2.5% over it. Okay, let us assume, Sheikh, that I have 67.5 grams of 24 karat gold. As in the example, you combine both and give zakat over both. The 20,000 riyals would definitely buy enough gold to make the gold you have reach a threshold and exceed. So you have to combine both and give 2.5% of it as zakat. Mars says, at night, I intend to fast my missed fast, but didn't wake for suhoor and did not fast. Will I be sinful? If you made the intention to fast a missed day or an obligation or a vow before you went to bed, so the intention is made. If you woke up before Fajr Adhan and found out that there is little time to eat or no time at all and changed your mind and decided not to fast, then there's no sin on you because you can delay that. But if you woke up after the Adhan of Fajr, eat, this is binding. You must continue the day. You cannot break the fasting of that day just yet, even if you're hungry, because you made the intention and you are already in that day fasting it. Masuma says, please guide us. Can we distribute zakat until the coming Ramadan year long, or we should give right away? Jazakallahu khairan. So many people think that giving the zakat at one go is not beneficial for the poor. So I have $10,000 of zakat. If I give it all to the poor, he or they will spend it on the spot. And then over the coming 12 months, they'll keep on ringing my bell and knocking on my door asking for help. Rather, I want to give the... Is it permissible? The answer is no. because once the zakat is due, it must be given immediately. And postponing it for this many months is not permissible. However, there is a way out. So my zakat is due today. I take the 10,000 and I distribute it to the poor. I'm out of zakat. Then I say to myself, this is another 10,000 of next year's zakat, which is due 12 months from today. This money I can give on monthly basis for a family of orphans and their mother who need expenses for the month. So every month I give them $800. The following month, $800, and it's from zakat. When next year's zakat is due, I calculate my wealth, and I find that the zakat is actually $12,000. So I'm $2,000 short. I take $2,000 and give it to the poor immediately. Or I may find that my wealth has decreased and my zakat is $9,000. So alhamdulillah, I already paid $9,000 and $1,000 is extra charity and not zakat. So I hope you understand that I give this last year's zakat, I give it today. Next year's zakat, I start giving it in installments till the zakat date is due 12 months from today. Furqan says, what is the ruling on, I'm from Pakistan and live in London since 2007 with daughters and wife. If I die here in London, what's the best way to bury in London or dead body sent back to Pakistan? Well, the sunnah is to bury the deceased body wherever he dies. Transporting the deceased corpse to a different country, even if it were to Mecca, or to reason and cause for that. So if a person dies in the UK, he should be buried in the UK. If he dies in Germany, in the US, as long as there are Muslims cemeteries there, he should be buried there. But if someone were to say to me, Sheikh, my brother died in America, so we have the option either to bury him in America only after they follow their own procedures, which are that they should perform an autopsy upon him. They cut him up and examine his internal organs, etc. Why would they do such a horrible thing? This is the procedure, Sheikh. Anyone who dies, they do this to him to ensure that he did not die out of murder or any other reason. What do you mean? A person who's 95 years old, he just simply died. Why do you have to open him up? So this is their laws. But because he's not American, if he demands that his corpse to be flown to his original country, Pakistan or whatever, they would not open him up. In this case, yes, you have to go for this option. You have to transport his body somewhere else where it would be treated as human as possible and in an Islamic fashion, rather than cutting him up like they do in such kafir countries. Fida says, I read that all parts of prayers of the Prophet ﷺ were proportional. He would spend the same time standing as he would do in ruku' and sujood. Can you explain? Does this apply to also the standing after ruku' and also to the sitting between sujood and tashahhud? should also they be equally long? The answer is yes. The sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, that his ruku', his standing up from ruku', Sami Allahu liman hamida, his sujood, and his sitting between the two prostrations are equal in length. This is the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ as was described by his companions. Isra says, during prayer, when reciting the opening surah, if we paused at the end of each ayah, Allah Azza wa Jal replies back, I wanted to know if we don't pause and we just go at a certain, Allah does not reply back. Isra is referring to Surah Al-Fatiha. And Allah's reply, as mentioned in the hadith, when Allah's servant says, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Allah replies by saying, my servant has praised me. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, my servant has complimented me. Maliki Yawmiddin, my servant has glorified. Allah says, this is for my servant, and my servant shall get what he has asked for. So Isra is saying, if a person says, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim Maliki Yawmiddin Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in ihdina as-sirata al-mustaqim as-sirata alladhina an'amta alayhim. Does Allah reply because of that speed and not pausing? The answer is, I don't know. Sorry, but this is something I have no knowledge of, and I don't know. Kalthum says, if a person is sick and unable to keep fast, such as a cancer patient, and we give fidya on her behalf, so we have to give zakatul fitr on behalf of her as well, although she didn't keep fast. For giving zakatul fitr on behalf of someone keeping fast, is it mandatory? The answer is yes. If you remember, when we talked about zakatul fitr, the hadith of Ibn Umar and Abu Sa'id al-Khudri and others clearly indicate that the Prophet ordered us to give zakat al-fitr on behalf of every Muslim, old and young, male and female, free and slave. So even if a child who is a 1-year-old does not fast, we must give fidya for him as well. Rabia says, sometimes when a person passes away, people ask questions regarding them like, how did it happen? He's sick, but he was so young, and how then just so suddenly? In short, if the person is not too old, people usually ask these types of questions. Is this permissible to ask? There's no problem in that. Such questions are not to complain or to reject or to object to Allah's destiny, but rather to show empathy and how saddened we are by this calamity. And finally, Yusufa says, tell us, what is your opinion of closing to avoid the contamination of coronavirus? We spoke about this so many times and said that the authorities running the country are stuck between a rock and a hard place. They have two choices: either to let people do whatever they want in the absence of a vaccine or a true cure and medication for that pandemic, and end up like Italy or France. The biggest problem is not in people falling sick. The biggest problem is in the medical facilities that are not equipped to handle so many patients, such influx in number. So the ventilators are one of the most important medical devices used to help patients. If in a whole country are 10,000, so you have to be selective in choosing which 500 to live and which 9,500 to die. This is what's happening in Italy. This is what's happening in most countries that are facing big problems. If this outbreak happens in America, it's a catastrophe. They're not equipped. The doctors have to decide who to live and who to die. Definitely they will go to people over 60 and say, sorry, we don't have a ventilator for you. And reserve the ventilator for someone who's 20 or 30 years of age. They would face the ethical dilemma of who to choose. Some of these countries, the youth are happy because the elders are dying. We can get houses now when they pass away. We can get jobs. We can save money instead of giving them retirement and other welfare expenses. So this is option one. The second option is to lock down everything, which would cause a lot of discomfort, agitation, and also economical burdens for people who cannot work, cannot earn. But quarantine is the best treatment for such pandemics. 4 weeks to 6 weeks of lockdown would cause the pandemic to wither and fade away with the grace of Allah. So again, this is not a decision for me and you to make. This is a decision of the authorities whom are responsible for tens of millions under their belt, maybe more than that. And if anything goes haywire, if anything goes wrong, they're the one who will be accountable in front of the people, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best. So this is the time we have for today. Until we meet next Thursday, I leave you fi amanillah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.